Good afternoon again. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the launch of this important activist tool titled Let Us Feed Ourselves Through Food Sovereignty. Thank you all for being here today. I'd like to welcome my panel as well, and thank you so much for being with us. As we all know, South Africans are actually struggling to survive. Our country is facing a humongous hunger crisis. And it's a crisis that is worsening. It's a crisis that is impacting the next generation as well. We currently have 12.8 million children who depend on a child support grant that is 42% below the average cost of a nutritious diet for a child. We are facing structural unemployment of 45%. Meanwhile, we are a country where the average cost of a nutritious food basket stands at over 4,800 rands. So one wonders really what that 45% of people who are unemployed, what they are eating every day. Now, the fact of the matter is that the solution from the hunger crisis and from the multiple crises we are facing, the solutions are not going to come from the elite. The solutions are not going to come from the government. The solutions are going to come from us, the people. And this is what this particular tool that we have launched is demonstrating. It's showing people's solutions to the hunger crisis that is currently battering South Africans. Solutions that people are implementing in rural areas. Solutions that people are implementing in peri-urban areas as well as in urban areas. Because for there to be real and effective change, that change has to come from the people. And that is what this tool is all about. It does not capture, of course, all of the amazing work that is being done across the country. You can find some of this amazing work if you go to the South African Food Sovereignty website and you look at our food commons map. You can see the amazing things that different communities across the country are doing, building food sovereignty pathways and alternatives where they live, making sure that they implement the next food system. So the tool that we are launching today, the Let's Feed Ourselves Food Sovereignty campaign, as I have said, captures some of the amazing work that comrades are doing across the country in building a food system that can withstand the bettering impacts of the climate crisis. Because as the climate crisis worsens, Southern Africa is a region that is designated as a climate change hotspot. We are warming at about twice the global rate of temperature increase. That is going to have a devastating impact on our food system. It's already impacting our food system, and it's only going to get worse. So to survive, basically, we need to pursue food sovereignty and we need to pursue agroecology. The two are interlinked and cannot be separated. So the tool is important because it highlights that important work that is being done by communities all around the country. But the tool also is important information or guidelines on how to set up a food sovereignty hub, how to build a core of activists and networks, how to work with your local community, how to understand agroecological farming, as well as your own willingness to invest in resources and to invest in times. Some of those things are captured in the tool. The importance of working with your community, prioritizing small-scale farming and agroecological farming, and so on and so forth. Now, today on the panelist, we have Davin, who's going to be speaking about the amazing work that they've been doing in the West Coast. We have Matthew, who's going to speak about the amazing work that they've been doing at Stellenbosch University. We have Natalie, who's going to be speaking about the amazing work that they've been doing also with Comrade Chinese. We also have Geronimo de Klerk. He'll also be talking about the amazing work that they are doing. We have Nosintu, and then finally we have Jane, who's going to be talking about the Food Sovereignty Hub at Wits University. So Comrade Davin, I'll give you to go first to talk about the amazing work you've been doing with the West Coast Food Sovereignty and Solidarity Forum. Thank you, Comrade. You have 10 minutes.
Good day, comrades. Thank you, Comrade Charles. Can you hear me clearly?
We can hear you
Can
very
we?
clearly. Thank you so much.
Yes. Yes, the Food Sovereignty and Solidarity Forum, we started in 2016 after many engagement with the South African Food Sovereignty Campaign and COPAC, having these tools how to form a forum inside the community. So we established the forum with other women and also youth in the community of Lutzville in the West Coast. The reason why we start and having this forum was for us, it was important because getting access to land was a big struggle and also how to use big land. But because of their work, staying in the community, we have the backyards and we start with the backyard gardenings where we practice food sovereignty and agroecology inside our own yards and also how we are spreading that out to the whole community and also to other neighboring towns in the West Coast. Also linking up with other provinces and building a network of food sovereignty inside the different provinces in the country. Also, we work closely with other movements and also with La Via Campesina because most of the work that we are doing and we speak about food sovereignty was based on the work of La Via Campesina, the international peasant organization. But the challenges that we have during this few years, the past years, was because of COVID. And when COVID regulations start, the lockdown regulations, we already have the backyard gardens and we could have provided for the community and also we started our soup kitchen where we look after our community, making sure that they get nutrition food because most of the produce that we are doing and also the type of agriculture that we practice was without any chemicals. So then we also have the challenges of water restriction in our different places in the West Coast. We we did survive day zero because we came up with other mechanisms how to save water and how we can use this water that we save for our gardens. The other problem that the challenge that we have was lack of education because whenever people when hungry, they don't have the capacity to do their own gardens, but also because people go out for food, they will they will use any food, no matter if it is full of chemicals, they will eat that food. But for us, it was important that we have the workshops in our community, train people about agroecology and food sovereignty, and also linking up with the fisher community in our neighboring towns, the Dwarama fisher folk, to look into the marine resources and also the challenge that we have with mining companies in our area. Mining companies that take away land that was meant for agriculture was taken away because the government promote mining. Besides, they don't look into agriculture. And also, we did see that from the mining companies, the pollution in the air and also in our water system, like our rivers and also the shoreline and also, yes, in the ocean. So for us, it is very important that we participate in building food pathways in the West Coast, downwards to Namakwaland and also the Hantam-Karoo, because we see every day what happened where mining companies come in, they destroy the whole environment. So our struggle isn't over, but when we join and also mobilize inside our community, we can also work in solidarity with other movements. And currently, we are in solidarity with other movements that we did research on climate change and also make us strong as women and youth to fight for climate justice. So currently we are working with Ubuntu Rural Women and Youth, Wendy Bakir and the team in the environmental side. This is basically women and young girls that participate in this movement. So this gives also the opportunity for us as women to be bold and also speak out. And also it's a platform for women because of our cultural dynamics, not to keep quiet, but speak out. So women in those few years where we practice agroecology and food sovereignty, women get out of the boundaries of silence and are very vibrant. So this is in short, but we need to mobilize and we need to look into our local governments also to give us a space to speak about food sovereignty and building food pathways, because we see that the food getting very expensive in the rural areas. We don't have access to a lot of other food stuff, and we don't have access to nutrition food if we look at the current agricultural system. But it's important for us to build and have a lot of small gardens where we can trade, not physically with money, but it's important that we trade with the produce that we have. For instance, if the one have cabbage and the other one have onions, how can we trade amongst each other with the produce that we have in the community? So thank you for the opportunity also that we can learn from you guys. And we like the activist tool guides that is currently available. It's not only that we learn from it as local communities, but also national and international, where we share our activist tool guides. It's like, oh, wow, can this be that a group of people inside South Africa have this beautiful guiding tools that they formulate. So thank you to everyone that is part of this movement to give us the knowledge and also the opportunity. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you so much, Comrade Davin. The essence of food sovereignty is in building solidarities. And I'm so impressed leading to the communities, different communities that you've been working with, local and international, especially working with women and young girls. Thank you so much, Comrade, and keep up the good work. Next, we have Matthew Wingfield who's going to talk to us about the Stellenbosch Food Garden. Now, the issue of student hunger is really a crisis that starts even from as early as primary school all the way up to secondary school, and it's also impacting students at universities. Matthew will touch on their interventions. Jane at the end will also touch on the same thing. And Matthew, over to you. And I hope you'll follow the spirit of Davin in keeping with time. So you're 10 minutes set now.
Great. Charles, just let me know if I'm audible.
Yes, you're audible.
Cool. Thank you so much. And firstly, thanks to Charles and the COPAC South African Food Sovereignty Group for asking me to speak today, and it's really an honor. But I'm basically just going to echo everything that Comrade Davin was saying. That firstly, I will expound on some things that are happening at Stellenbosch. But as Charles said, it's important to note how hunger, the problem of hunger, is intersecting every part of society. So I think that we really need to think about how important that is and how important of a struggle it is in every single sector of society, not just with youth, not just with the elderly, not just with the unemployed. Every single sector of society, I think, is affected by this issue. But yeah, so Stellenbosch University, we developed a food garden at the end of 2019, when we realized during the COVID, and this is similar to what Davina is saying, but what we realized is that the university, Stellenbosch University, and other universities, and I think this is a very a factual thing to state, but they aren't doing enough for their students regarding provisions and livelihoods, and especially regarding food and the livelihoods around food and food sovereignty. So what happened during the end of COVID is we realized that the university had basically shut down. And this is, again, something that happened at all universities in the country and across the world. But those students that lived on campus, were living on campus, did not have access to food. And the university rolled out this sort of Move for Food campaign, which is basically just a fundraising strategy for the university to fund money to buy some food for students. But we realized, and with the help of COPAC and South African Food Sovereignty Campaign and other comrades and colleagues, we realized that this is not really an acceptable way to address such a perverse and intersectional issue that is hunger. So what we did was contact a lecturer at the University of Stellenbosch who works in indigenous food crops, Dr. Ethel Perry. And we raised our concerns, and we noted that as a few students that we were quite concerned about food hunger or student hunger and food insecurity on campus. So when we contacted the university, they noted that around 30% of students are food insecure, and this was, I think, a very low estimate, actually. I think it's much higher. So we made a few collaborations in developing the project, but really we wanted to develop a project, and we got a bit of land in the the Welgevalen experimental farm area at Stellenbosch to grow some food. And we thought it was crazy that you go into these spaces, these agricultural hubs at universities that serve an academic purpose, right? But we realized that they weren't growing food for students or for anyone, really. They were growing them for experiments, and what happened with the food afterwards wasn't really a main concern. That was problematic for us. So what we did was we started growing food, and not mass production, but food, especially indigenous crops. And we asked students to come, those students that are food insecure and not, to come and engage in the garden around indigenous crops. And someone's posted in the chat, seed saving and all those types of things, through basically the resources and the books, etc., provided by the South African Food Sovereignty Campaign, those extremely valuable resources that Comrade Davine was talking about. And what we did was develop a food garden that was firstly to feed students. Yes, that is absolutely important. And we did that, and we have been doing that since the end of 2019. For a few students, it's not a large-scale garden, but what we also have done is create a community around the garden and educate students about how to grow food, what kind of food is grown, and what crops are lost. There's literature on the lost crops of Africa, and indigenous crops are all lost, because if we think about our industrialized food production systems, people only think about one or two crops, and there's strong critiques against monocropping. And that got me interested, where I did some work later and some research in the Cape Flats in the Philippine horticulture area. But really, this garden was developed through a range of collaborations, as Comrade Davine again is saying, collaborations with lecturers, with student societies, with a range of partners that we could find at the university. These projects, even a small garden, I think people might underestimate how much effort and connections it takes to make sure it continues going. That's not to say that one should not strive to create gardens. They are great, and you can start very small, and that's what we did. We didn't hope to feed the 10,000 students that are food insecure at Stellenbosch. We try to develop a community, develop a garden to feed a few students, and that's what we've done. The collaborations with Dr. Ethel Perry was extremely valuable, and really a comrade in the inside of the university that's helped us deal with a lot of the institutional dynamics, bureaucratic politics at the universities. And I think this is something all students or staff members, etc., at institutions like universities will have to deal with. And I think we were able to navigate them to some degree, but there are a lot of hurdles that we face that have really hampered what we've tried to do. But what's happened now at the, and one other collaboration that's extremely important, and then I'll start wrapping up. But one extremely important collaboration was with student societies. A range of student societies have helped the project develop through a range of resources, both financial and human, but also just getting people involved and making sure that a society, they've adopted the food garden as a project. So they can ensure that when I leave, when other students leave, they will be able to continue, this garden, which is so important. We cannot continue to live in the political cycle or a student life cycle. We must think how to ensure longevity with our projects. Otherwise, there's a lot of effort for nothing. Not for nothing, but it could benefit more people in the future. But one thing that's important in understanding, how this garden developed is that the institutional politics at universities are really, they clamp down on these sort of projects. And what's happened actually now is when the university has fought us for all these years in the development of this project, they've now started marketing that they've developed a food garden for students and so on. So it's something quite frustrating, but at the end, when students are being engaged in these projects, and it is a different way of thinking from the usual, let's try and tap into our funders and just try and pay our way through a problem. That is the same logic that's creating the problem. So we as students, we as activists can think differently, and I think that's important. But I do want to note the absolutely critical and irreplaceable role that the resources that the COPAC and the South African Food Sovereignty campaign have put out. These things, most people are mystified about growing their own food, indigenous crops, agroecological frameworks for growing food. But the resources that you find on YouTube and on the websites and so on are so valuable from demystifying and making it quite simple. And that's really what it is. It's growing food in a way that benefits people rather than just, going to a supermarket and buying food. So it's really an honor to be in conversation with my fellow comrades on the call. And I think we can all learn from each other. And I have learned so much from, the networks in this group. So thank you. And I hope I'm in time.
Thank you so much, Matthew. You raised some very, very important points, and you're absolutely right. The food crisis is part of the multiple crises that this country is facing. Basically, the crisis of survival, because people are struggling to survive, people are struggling to live. And thank you so much also for availing yourself, Matthew. Always learn a great deal from you. And next we have Natalie Ahmed and Rashida Elias from the Vigronde Agroecological Hub. And I know you've been working very hard with the Vigronde community and other local stakeholders to strengthen solidarities there. So Neti and Rashida, over to you. You have 10 minutes.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for our 20 minutes. I'll be handing over to Sister I.
Good day, everyone. My name is Rashida Elias. Everyone knows me as Sister I. I am a founder member of the Vigronde Hub and Soup Kitchen. Yes, and a community leader. Yeah, we've started the hub in 2020 during COVID-19. Looking into our social problems, then we see starvation. And people were very stranded, not knowing what to do, because you cannot be locked up in a house and you don't have access to food. So it was a great challenge, actually. So we started up in 2020, early 2020. I started with my own house garden. And after that, we started with the community hub. Yes, it was very challenging because of water is a truly and really a crisis in our area. And especially these days, it is a great, great challenge. But we managed to push through. We pushed through because why? We were willing and able because we see a social problem, and where there is a will, there is a way. So yes, eventually the hub was created and it did develop. We could get nice spinach from the hub, peppers, we did get pumpkin, even beetroot. Yeah. And we've recently started to work on our medicinal area in the hub, where we can have people access to medicinal plants, because of, if we look at our health department, if you go for a cough or just a headache, you won't get something at the clinic. So yeah, where we can go to our hub and get some medicinal from the hub for free. So yes, it is quite challenging, but we push through. And as yet, the water is really a problem. It is a great, great problem. But the hub we created to sustain the soup kitchen, so that we can give the people fresh and organic food, so that we know that the food we're giving the people, it is very healthy. And we have given our community food from the garden. We were very lucky enough to get a few nice big pumpkins. So it was all by the grace of the Most High, because really, actually the rain helped that pumpkin to grow. Otherwise, we wouldn't have got any products from the hub. But we could get it, and we're sustaining the soup kitchen out of the community hub. It is very challenging to getting food, and with the food prices that is going up daily, it's a problem. Yeah, also for our youth, they are learning through our hub. So we also have educational programs that we do at our community hub. And yes, at first it was a challenge because of the mindset of the people. We are not thinking all the same, that this hub can be a benefit for all of us. But at the end, or I was, for the few months now, I can see when I look around my area and I look to my neighbors, I can see, yeah, something's happening. So I feel great because we could get some of the people to change their mind into growing food, so that at the end we can kick poverty under feet, so that people must know that when I grow food, I must love Mother Earth. So we must water it, and we must look very well after it, so that it can produce good and fresh organic food for us. Because a healthy diet is a healthy body and a healthy mindset. Yes, that is the Medi. So after that, we only believe in serving the people, you see. Yeah, serving the people by giving the people good food, so that the people can also have a healthy mind to can produce also. So in our area, people have started, we've given small seedlings to some of our people in our community who wanted to start a garden. So they did, and it looks good. So at least we feel great that there is the sort of a development. So people's backyards is becoming green and green and green, and we hope in the future to can get assistance for them, so that they can keep on planting and producing good food. I thank you. I will give to Natalie now.
Thank you so much, Sister Ai. So I'm Natalie Ahmed, and I'm representing an NGO called Support Center for Land Change, and we are community partners with the project or the hub of the community. So I just want to share with you guys how where we fit into what the community are pushing us on a ground level. So we've assisted the community by getting some additional funds to maintain and sustain the garden. So they are now also in partnership with an NGO based in PE called ICALA, who is supporting the hub, keeping in mind that they have been operating without external funds since 2020. Up until this year, they got the funds to survive and to show the broader and the external partners that they are serious when they speak of development in an informal settlement. They are also part of the local women's task team that was initially started by SCLIC, but the representatives on the women's task team are able to take it back, and because of that, it promoted the greener backyards in some way. And the focus was especially to focus on the women that is working in the soup kitchen and to take the idea out to the broader community. One of the other successes the community is facing is that the hub is getting recognition on a municipal level because it's an informal settlement. They have been fighting for their socioeconomic rights, and especially focusing on the right to water and sanitation, electricity, ownership of their household properties, but on the plan recognized and acknowledged as a community project that will be part of the informal settlement. So that was a big positive for the community, and also putting some more pressure on the municipality to look at the water needs that the community is currently facing. And with the funding the community got, they sorry, everybody. I don't know what happened. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
All right. Thank you. So I just ended off by saying the recognition that a hub is getting on a municipal level within the informal settlement, and also with the other partner of the leaders of the hub was able to be part of an organizational development and project management training earlier this year to capacitate and enhance themselves even more, to drive the hub even more further, to ensure that communities staying in informal settlements own their own struggles, they voice out, and they can show the municipality on what level they see themselves living and staying and providing for themselves. And as part of keeping the community involved and building unity within the community, the hub always participate in national and international events like the World Earth Day celebrations, is spaces that we use to educate the community regarding that and how it is linked within the struggles that we are facing locally. We are planning something for World Food Day that is coming up soon, and we always try to enable the youth and capacitate the youth so that there can be talks within the community and amongst each other to ensure that people don't think or believe that we live in isolation because we live in smaller towns or because we are not visibly out there, but that everything is interlinked at the end of the day with each other. So I hope that made a lot of sense, that despite of all the many challenges that we face, we always like to promote the positive that's going on. So did I cover it all? I think we are covered now. Thank you. And I hope you guys will see our video that we made, and then it will give you, we just gave you the picture, the video will color it in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sister I, and thank you so much, Netly. And this is one of the most exciting thing about these food sovereignty hubs. They are not just about producing food. They are spaces of learning. They are spaces of organizing. They are spaces of building community solidarities as well. So thank you so much for that. Next, we have Comrade Geronimo de Klerk, who's going to talk about the Feed the Future for Life campaign and the exciting work that they've been doing in the Cape Flats. Comrade Geronimo, over to you.
Thank you very much, comrades. Just apologies because of my video. I will start to drive now. Hi, comrades. I am Geronimo for all of you to see my face. So I'll be starting to drive now. That's why I'm going to put off my video. So I'm from the Cape Flats, Elsies River in Cape Town. So our organization Feed the Future for Life is a non-profit organization that is, of course, youth-led. So one of the main things that our organization is doing is to promote sustainable livelihoods. And I think the key thing that I've been hearing since the meeting has started is that everyone is based on community level, and to make sure communities, is first in whatever they do. And of course, how important the food is, and of course, our food security also plays a huge role within our daily livelihoods. And I mean the food prices, of course. And I've been hearing people is talking about the hunger crisis and so forth. And I think what Feed the Future does is Feed the Future is working within the schools, because the main reason why we went into schools to work with schools by creating spaces such as food gardens and community food gardens. But let me start off by saying the reason why we went into the schools to promote the food gardens within the schools is because our education system that's currently ruling in the education schools and so forth is not the education system that promotes sustainable livelihoods. It's not the education system to teach us how to be sustainable. It's not an education system where people can say that they can be sustainable when they're unemployed. They can be sustainable when they don't have a job. So that is why we moved into school. That is why we're working in the schools by creating the spaces. And by creating the spaces, we're also promoting the education around the food and food security. And I think out of the Western Cape, we receive 50% of the food that is coming out of Western Cape is coming on our plates, and that is only a number of 50%. So all the other foods that is that's been grown or that's coming out of farms and so forth is coming straight out of the other areas, like other countries, but not out of the Western Cape. So we want to make sure that we can rise that 50%, of course, with a 70%, or not even 70%, but 100%. That is why we went into schools by promoting the food gardening, by promoting skills around permaculture, agriculture, and so forth. So that is why the importance, of course, why we went into the schools, of course. And the reason why we planted in the communities is because many of you guys mentioned it, and many of the comrades mentioned it, is that the food that we receive is not sufficient. And I think that I mentioned the last time is that we did a pilot where we tried to map out food. And we saw and we witnessed that we've mapped out more junk food than the nutrition food. That's, of course, organic food that's growing from food gardens, that's growing from small scale farming, that's growing from the farms, of course. And that is why we want to implement these community gardens within all the open spaces. And since the beginning, since we started with permaculture ways, with resources that we had, and we moved on where we are now in all different communities. And not just to mention is that the Western Cape Minister of Agriculture visited our spaces where we started to grow food. And of course, for him, he had witnessed that the amount of changes that we have made in the community, it's quite a huge amount of changes. where we implemented the food gardens. Of course, we did not decrease hunger by 100%, but we decreased hunger within our communities with a percentage which government not even touched based on. So that is why I think the importance of promoting the food, and that is why the importance of promoting the food is what Feed the Future do. And I also would like to add, of course, that with the resources, and I saw on the chat people is asking about the seeds and the seedlings, about NGOs and NPOs. The seeds that we are currently growing, we reuse it. And then of course, once we reuse, we go and explore in other communities and make open spaces, and that's where we create. And one of the key projects, or the biggest project that's also coming up for Feed the Future now, is that we want to create 1,000 household gardens, and we also want to create 100 community food gardens. And when I'm talking about 1,000 household gardens, it's quite a lot, because I mean, people can then become sustainable. Though one of the questions that I also that people always ask is, how do you become sustainable? And of course, in today, in society of today, it's difficult to become sustainable, because we saw and we witnessed that hunger is already defeating us, unemployment is already defeating us. So we need to see the ways how we can become sustainable. And of course, the answer is clear. Many of the comrades mentioned it. It is clear. I mean, there's a hub in Stellenbosch. Some of the comrades mentioned the food that are growing in Stellenbosch. Except me, that also now mentioning the food growing. So I think the answer is clear, is that to become sustainable is to make sure that our food is secured. And how do we secure our food? And it's definitely by bringing these changes within the communities, bringing these changes within the youth. And that is ways that we need to create, or that is ways that Feed the Future create ourselves to become the change makers. Or that is why we are a youth-led organization. That is why we want to lead as the youth, because I think it's important. If the food security is already on this level now, how will it be in the future? And I mean, some of the comrades mentioned now that water was one of the biggest things that's a key point for them to struggle on when it comes to food garden, community food gardens. And I think water is quite important, because without water, you can't grow food. And without water, it's difficult for you to keep your body also healthy as well. And that is where water and vegetable growing plays part, because that is the key things that you need as a human being in order for you to keep your body, to maintain your body as well. And then I would also like to mention, I think a few days from now, it's World Food Day. But what does World Food Day means to us? What does World Food Day means to us, of course, as communities? What does World Food Day means to the communities that doesn't have food? What does it mean to children that goes to bed hungry? What does it mean for children that gets education without food? So that is why we want to implement these changes. We can't, celebrate World Food Day when people don't have food. We can't do these kind of activities when we're not promoting the sustainable platforms, where we not create platforms where people can grow food. That is why we always mention that we as the youth need to bring the changes, and that is one of the biggest changes that we want to bring. We want to make sure that on a daily basis, our people is thinking sustainable. Our people's mindset is on a sustainable level, and that is why I'm so glad for this opportunity, of course, and this honor for me to speak today to the comrades in terms of how we see to move forward, what we need to do in order for us to make sure that anything that we do is in a sustainable method. And I think we have launched a documentary just a year ago. I've said it now in the chat. It's part of our. It's on our Baker Buddy link, where comrades can go onto the link and see the documentary. It's where we plant food, and after the food gets planted, it goes harvested through the youth. After it's harvested, it goes straight into the feeding scheme that we are working in the Cape Town area. After it goes to the feeding scheme, people get fed through the food, of course. So I've been sharing the link now in the group chat. So if comrades after the meeting, wants to have a look at the documentary, they can have a look at the documentary. And I mean, the changes is clear within the documentary. We make clear changes so people can have can view it as a daily livelihood challenge, because our people is facing it on a daily basis. And one of the schools that we are working in is Edward Primary, is the local school. We have created a very successful food forest. In the last 2 weeks, we had a food garden there at first, but we've noticed that the food that we are growing, it's not enough. So that is why we created a sustainable food forest in this space where we witness that the kids is taking harvesting or vegetable that is done harvested, they're taking home. So after they take it home, people come back with the testimony of their food. People come back to say that this is what happened to that food, and the few days we benefited from the food. This is how much people get fed from the food. And I think it's important for us to know how many people we feed through the community food gardens, through the community food gardens. And I also with me, I also have one of my comrades that's also working within the food garden spaces. And I think what key is that he can also say a part of the story, because he's also part of Feed the Future as well, and he's one of the head of the volunteers in all our gardens. And currently Feed the Future is branched out in different areas. It's in Khayelitsha, and Khayelitsha is quite the biggest here in Cape Town. Then it's Nyanga, then it's Alces River, then it's Clark Estate, and then it's Trinity Place. I mean, that is the food gardens that we established in the communities. And from the amount of hunger that we saw in the community of Alces River, there was an amount of hunger that was up onto 50%, and we decreased it up onto 30%. I mean, it's not much, but we did very well. It's a quite good change that we can do. And that is why I feel so encouraged by all the comrades that sharing their story about the food gardens. And I think it's not just about food gardens. I think my comrade Charles mentioned it now. It's not just about food gardens, about mobilizing. It's about bringing hope in the communities. It's about bringing power into communities. It's to make hope bringing hope and make hope contagious within our communities. Because I think the key thing for our youth now is to make sure that there's hope for the future. Because like Comrade Charles also mentioned previously, he said that people is living on a survival mode. So what does it mean when people is trying to live on survival modes? They try anything for them to make sure that they can eat, which is difficult. Some people choose violence to make sure that they can eat. Some people are going to different parts to make sure they can eat, because our system that's currently in place, it's not working for us. It's not working for communities. It's not working for youth. It's also not working for schools as well. That is why the key thing, and I will always mention it, is that we want to go in the school and try to make sure that they can put in, or we want to change the education system where they can educate our kids around how to make sure that your climate is protected, how to make sure that you can become sustainable. And what does food garden, how does food garden and farming and permaculture ways and all these green environment plays a role within the climate change. I mean, those are the type of education that are not being taught into schools. That is why we create this after school programs for them, so that they can have this education. And I think it's important, because I think education is a powerful resource for our youth, for our communities, but also important to teach the right education that people will need on a daily basis, education that people will need to survive, to become sustainable education. That is why I always mention it. That changes. I think I mentioned it on the last meeting that we had in Joburg, that the changes, it should come from the youth in the community, and it should come from communities in youth. And I think it's the powerful thing that we as comrades or organization have in this time now is that time, because time is the most powerful resources that we have. And of course, that plays part with time is that all the projects that we're creating to place part with the environment, to have this positive impact on the environment. And of course, when I need to see to a food garden is that food garden gives positive impact on the climate. It gives a positive into the community, positive education, and it also provide people for something to eat, a daily meal. And secondly, it also bring people together, to also mobilize people, also bring hope within our communities. And I think our communities, there's no hope. And I think to bring hope back into the communities is one of the things that we as NGOs, NPOs, community organizations, grassroots activists is trying to do on a daily basis, because the system is currently not working for us. And I think it's important for us to see the ways or create ways where people can, become not sustainable, not dependent on the government, because government is also not working for us. So that is what makes it more important for us to see the ways that we can become sustainable. And I think also what the COPEC team and also the climate justice charter team is doing is to build communities in solidarity, and it's also to make sure that whatever impact that we are doing is a positive impact. I mean, I've been representing the climate justice charter to a few communities now, and the communities is adapting to the charter, and people is signing up to be part of the group, of course, because they can see when Parliament adopt the charter, you know, it can decrease hunger, that it can decrease pollution, and it can also make sure that we have sufficient water. So that is why I think the key thing for us as communities, grassroots level activists, community food gardens, organizations, non-profit organizations, is to promote sustainable livelihoods within our community, to promote the education around food and food security, also to promote everything that we are doing in our community. I'm sure that I've been speaking a lot, so you can just cut me off when I'm a bit over my time, Charles. That's not a problem.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
very much for the opportunity. So sorry I took all of your time. I'm so sorry, comrade, for that. Apologies.
Thank you so much, comrade. No worries. Thank you for availing yourself, and thank you for the wonderful work that you do. Without taking much time, I'll hand over to Comrade Nosintu Kwepile from the Abanebongo People with Disabilities. Thank you so much, Comrade. Over to you. You have 10 minutes. Comrade Nosintu, are you there? Comrade Nosintu, are you there?
Hi, comrade.
Hello, comrade.
Hi, comrade. Actually, I'm on the road. I'm in a taxi now in East London on the way to my to Ngamakwe, but it's kind of quiet. I'm not sure if you guys can hear me.
We can hear you perfectly, comrade.
Okay, comrade. Forgive me if I'm actually breaking down. So yeah, this is actually Unosinto Mtimeli from Ngamakwe, from Abanebongo persons with disabilities. I'm going to make things short. I tried to actually log into the SAFSC website, try to log in to put in some photos and fill the forms. I hope that everything went well, but shortly Abanebongo, after it started to got registered, we were actually from the activism of schooling from Okopek, and we decided to actually move down to Eastern Cape, to the rural villages, whereby we told ourselves that we want to plant back our skills. Forgive me if there is noises, people are talking in the taxis, but I actually wanted to put my input. But after we started with COPEC helped us starting their small gardens, because even if the organization is for people living with disabilities, what we actually realized here in the villages is that we have got communal land, and we knew that everything you do, you have to start creating food, so your programs can actually sustain. We realize that people living with disabilities and vulnerable people like old age people and disadvantaged households are actually in a severe hunger. So as Abanebongo and activists that actually went to the activist school, we thought that we must start with the community gardening project. So we did that with the help of COPEC, but unfortunately, shortly after that, there was lockdown, COVID, and also there was a severe drought. But Abanebongo couldn't just sit back and do nothing. We organized the community soup kitchen, and it was the very first thing that actually ever happened in the villages. But we survived for the period of 6 months. Luckily, we had our community gardens. We had lots of vegetables. We took veggies from there. Luckily, ShopRite them and other sister organization helped us to bring food in, and we actually survived 6 months of hard lockdown, feeding our communities that were locked in their households because of the lockdown. Then after that, there was a drought, and we actually kind of were lacking water, and we cried to the world because of the training that we got from activist school from Okopek. We actually decided to go out to the world and speak out. Then we did radio and newspaper interviews, and we spoke to different people in the world, and luckily we got someone who actually told us that we are going to give you guys free of charge, and we will install a borehole. So now we've got that e-community borehole. That is one of our achievements. Now, what we actually now want to do from community small gardens, we want now to spread widely, to use those communal lands, that is big hectares of land. What we now want to do is to actually fence those big lands using our community borehole that is there. Our water has been tested, passed the library thingy, and we want to do irrigation scheme so that we can plant as plenty of organic food as possible for our community, so that wide range of people can be able to enjoy and sustain food sovereignty. That is what we want to build: food sovereignty, not food sovereignty, not food security, but food sovereignty for everyone. Even if the next drought can come, if we couldn't be able to stop this climate crisis, then we can be able to have enough food. So yeah, from my side, because of the situation or that I'm in at this moment, I'd like to stop there, and I'm glad I got this opportunity to share what is Abanebo doing down on the ground. I just came from one of the workshops with different communities, and I just spoke there with climate crisis and climate justice charter, and people are so interested to actually join a climate justice charter, movement, so that we can move this, because it was a workshop about growing your own food in a permaculture way. So everyone there realized that linking a climate crisis and climate activism, fighting the climate crisis, works together with what we were in today. So I'm glad about that, and I'm on my way home now. Thank you so much at the moment.
Thank you so much, Comrade Nosinto. The work you are doing with rural communities building food sovereignty pathways is so inspiring, and I hope you get home safe. Next, we'll have Jane Cherry to talk about the VETS Food Sovereignty Hub. Jane, over to you.
Great, thanks, Charles. Sure, it's really inspiring to hear everybody's stories, and I'm going to just share the VITS one for those of you who haven't heard it. So just to begin, I'm going to talk about the VITS Food Sovereignty Center, a little bit about the background and the vision, and just to say that our experience during COVID was non-existent. We weren't allowed onto the university campus, as Matthew also highlighted. And so, yeah, I can't really talk much about that, but I will talk about what we did before and after COVID. So, just to start, my slides aren't going down. There we go. The WITS Food Sovereignty Center vision. So the vision of the WITS Food Sovereignty Center is to create a university that is ecocentric, provides leadership through its own example to advance food sovereignty and climate justice. As a hub and pathway, it then becomes an example for more hubs in the inner city, through which an inner city alliance and pathway can be advanced. And the idea is that these hubs serve to network households, small-scale producers, seed savers, water commoning initiatives, consumer markets, and cultural nutrition programs related to indigenous food. So that's the vision, and this is kind of in line with the SAFSC hub and pathway vision as well, really just setting up hubs that can inspire and spawn other hubs. And I guess that's the idea of sharing all of these initiatives with you today, to inspire you to also initiate gardens and hubs if you haven't already done so. So that's the vision. I don't know why I'm struggling to, there we go, next slide. But how do we achieve this vision, and what steps have we taken so far? I'm going to just give a very brief background to the Wits Food Sovereignty Centre. So it was quite a lengthy process, which started 7 years ago, back in 2015, when a student forum was established at Wits, and this later became the INALO Food Sovereignty and Climate Justice Forum. This was actually started and initiated by some students from Vish's international relations class, and also from other students from across the faculties and the campus. And then the students then decided, and I was one of them at that time, to set up our first food garden. And just for those of you who don't know, Vish is the board chairperson of COPAC. And so this initiative and the garden was then supported by COPAC and SAFSC. So during 2016, together with SAFSC, INALO students took part in the National Bread March and handed over a memorandum to Wits, which laid out how the university could become more food sovereign and climate just. And here's some photos of that march and the students handing over the memorandum and the Wits person signing the memorandum. And after discussions with Wits management, the sanctuary building was then allocated to the Wits Citizenship and Community Outreach. So this is where the existing university-funded meal bank is hosted by the WCCO. And there's also a donor-sponsored food bank. But this beautiful building, and I'll show you some pictures in a bit, this became the Wits Food Sovereignty Centre. Just to mention, before this, the food bank and the meal bank was located underneath the matrix, so the loading bay where all the trucks would pull in to load the matrix, which is basically the fast food space at campus. So it was really an undignified space where hungry students would line up. So it really meant that we could create a more dignified space for students to receive their parcels and eat their meals, and also later cook their own meals if they wanted to. Then in 2018, COPAC entered into a memorandum of agreement with Wits to set up the centre and also the site to become a hub, which would serve as an example to other big institutions and other institutions in South Africa. COPAC and WCCO have then been working together with different student groups. So also, like Matthew spoke about, a lot of different student societies have come on board, and it's really been inspiring and encouraging. And then, as I mentioned, 2020 and 2021 were very quiet, not much happened. At the end of 2021, we were allowed back on campus. And so we started reviving some of the gardens, which had all gone to seed, very sadly. And then also earlier this year, we were given a new piece of land by Wits management to set up our second hub. So that was quite exciting. So just quickly, the objectives of these hubs, or the centre at Wits, is to end hunger at Wits through food sovereignty pathways, to create zero carbon and zero waste university, and to use this model and elements as a basis to reach the goal of ending hunger in the inner city Johannesburg. And so these are some of the elements, internal and external elements of the Wits Food Sovereignty Centre. And I've listed them here, but I will go through them each individually quite quickly, where my time is running out. So firstly, land, water, composting and food gardens. This is about setting up food commons gardens across the university, maintaining the gardens, harvesting water, or using water very wisely in the gardens, developing a zero waste approach, and offering training in these elements to Wits staff, students, and the greater community. And there are currently 4 food gardens at Wits. We've mapped out space for another 17. And these gardens are maintained by the students. We're trying to get them institutionalized because during exam time and holiday time, the students, although they are usually very enthusiastic, you can understand that they'd rather be studying or they might go home. So we really want to get the Wits staff on board to help us, the ground staff to help us maintain the gardens. And yeah, these gardens provide fresh produce to the students, and students can also cook them at the communal kitchen. We also encourage the Wits ground staff or anyone to really pick the produce. We're creating a food commons at Wits. So here's just a few more pictures of the training we've had at the center and at the different gardens. And we set these gardens up under the guidance of John Nzira, who's an agroecology expert. And we invite members of the public, the students, staff to come and learn about food sovereignty and agroecology and permaculture principles so that they can go back to their homes and communities and share this knowledge with others. The second element very quickly is the communal kitchens and a dignity space for students. And this is the sanctuary building, top left, which was later painted by an Bolivian muralist, which really made it quite beautiful. But here students had the opportunity to come and cook meals and also learn from some chefs that we invited into the space. So if they maybe didn't have a space to stay or they didn't have a kitchen at home and they really wanted to eat nutritional food, they could come and cook food from the garden and some food that was donated. And Amnesty International Student Society actually helped us run the communal kitchen. And then third, we have food culture programs. As I said, this was painted by a Bolivian muralist, so that's our first attempt at getting it to be a really interesting cultural space. And here we want to set up a program on food, indigenous knowledge, recipes, where students can come and learn about indigenous seed, growing indigenous food, have cook-ins and poetry and all of that. We haven't managed to do much. We've had a few isolated events, but we really want it to be something that can happen quite often, and also run by students. Yeah, so that's the food culture programs. Yeah, just to say that COVID really did put a little bit of a halt on all of our attempts. So it does feel like we're kind of starting from scratch because there's a new batch of students in, but we are gradually making progress. And then another element is eco-demonstration. So we want the center, both centers, to be symbolic spaces to demonstrate zero carbon, zero waste, and zero hunger practices and technologies. And we have lined up some solar to go on the second hub site that we've been given by Wits. We've also got some water harvesting or JoJo tanks at 2 of the sites, and we've got some JoJo tanks waiting to be installed at our new site. And then we also want to have food sovereignty consumer co-ops or markets. Long term, ideally, we want to set up a co-op. But before COVID, we set up a farmers market, which was a lovely place for farmers to come and sell their fresh produce, inner city farmers from Johannesburg. So that was really a great market, which we haven't managed to start up again, but we will do that hopefully soon. And then there's some elements that are in the pipeline. We want it to be a food sovereignty research center, just noting that at Wits there isn't really a space or in a faculty or an institution that studies agroecology and permaculture. So this can be that new space. And then we're looking at setting up some external elements, which are kind of already happening as we engage with people who come to our workshops to set up an inner city food sovereignty alliance, but also we want to set up some more inner city agroecology hubs. So just to end, I know I'm over time, Charles, just 20 more seconds. So this is our Wits Center. It's a hub and it serves as a community engagement and eco-demonstration space, a space of dignity for food stressed students, and a support space for advancing food sovereignty in society. And we still have a long way to go, but we are quite proud of where we've come, and we're grateful to be able to share these experiences with everyone else. That's me, Charles. Thank you. Charles, I think you're still muted.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jane. That was a very important contribution. Thank you so much. Exciting work happening at the Wits. Sorry, at the Wits Food Sovereignty Hub. We have some time to take some comments and questions from our attendees. You can write in the chat, but it always becomes much more interactive when you raise your hand to speak. So we will now open it up to our attendees. You can raise your hand. I will allow you to speak for any comments with regard to many of the case studies that have been shared here today. Unfortunately, Matthew has had to leave because he had another commitment that he had to attend to urgently. But we always thank him for his time. So if you have any comments or questions, please raise your hand and I will allow you to speak. Or alternatively, you can type in the chat. All right, there's a hand from Shadrach. Shadrach, please unmute yourself. Shadrach?
Good afternoon, comrades. Thank you
Afternoon.
very much, Comrade Charles. I unfortunately I heard that you said Matthew left. My question was in relation to the project at Stellenbosch University. Wanted to ask Matthew if you are still with us here. Because he said that they only feed a few students in that particular establishment. So my question to him was going to be, what stops them to expand the project, and also probably seek, if not to demand, some assistance from the university for them to be able to feed the entire establishment or institution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Comrade Shadrach. The challenges faced at universities are similar. Jane, maybe you have a comment with some of the challenges that you've been facing with the VETS Hub with regard to feeding a wider population of students.
Sure. Do you want me to go now, Charles?
Yes, since there are no hands, Jane, you can go now.
Okay, sure. Yeah, Shadrach, I think we have something similar at WITS. We aren't feeding the entire hungry WITS population, and that really is just because we don't have enough space. Noting that we have quite a bit of space and we haven't planted it all. So the issue that we really have now is just getting students on board. So our last garden that we set up, it was set up earlier in April, May, somewhere around there. And we got quite a few student volunteers to come and help us on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. We had a rotation schedule, so the student only had to go once a month, which isn't a lot. And they were initially very excited to go. But over time, I could see that students, we had WhatsApp groups, and people can report back on their little visit to the garden. So they were only expected to go for about half an hour to an hour once a month. But you could see that students had stopped going. Somehow they lost interest, or maybe they had exams or holidays and they didn't notify us. And so it really is just the difficulty of maintaining those gardens. It's also been quite a challenge. We anticipated that it would be a challenge. And so we've really been trying to work with the WITS services to get some of the ground staff on the team, to invite them to the training so they can learn about how to maintain the gardens well in an agroecological way. Some of them did attend the training, but then there was the issue that it wasn't really worked into the job spec, and they didn't want to bring unions onto the table, into the discussion. And so it's really just been a challenge back and forth with WITS to try and get them to support us. With that said, they have actually raised a bit of money to help us with the one hub. But then there's just, I don't know, the bureaucracy, and it all just takes long. Matthew even commented on this. Everything takes long. We started back in 2017, and I think it was end of 2018, we got some funding for a little meeting pod and solar, and we still haven't got the plans to put that in place. Because if we have a place there where we can meet and host these events and lock up, we have a little space to lock up our thing, but where people can go and sit and meet, that would really help. So yeah, I guess the problem really is just capacity for now. You have to start small, and then just take it from there. Thanks.
Jane, if maybe you can address the question from Leila, do you accept volunteers from outside the university?
Yes, of course we do. We have two people who travel once a month all the way from Midrand. They're very consistent volunteers, but we definitely do.
Thank you so much, Jane. Just before we go to Jane Queen, there are several questions that have been asked by Randa Bell in the chat. Just to say that the purpose of this particular webinar was the launch of the tool, as well as to hear from all of these communities and activists what they are doing in their areas to build food sovereignty pathways and alternatives. So with regard to training on practical skills, on soil testing, on crop nutrition, we have been having all those programs throughout. And in fact, we have several tools on the South African Food Sovereignty webpage. We have several videos on our YouTube as well that address many of these issues, practical skills, your soil testing, your agroecological farming. So in this particular webinar, we're hearing from the communities how they've been building food sovereignty pathways where they are. The other training materials are part of the tools on our website, and we also have multiple YouTube videos, and we also have been discussing these issues in several webinars. So just to respond to Randa there. Jane, if you can enable Jane Queen to speak.
Hi, thanks everybody. Yeah, thanks for this really very interesting whole webinar. I have similar experiences to what you guys have at WIT. I'm at UKZN in Pietermaritzburg, but on a much smaller scale than what you were doing. Just to give you a bit of background, I was involved in a crisis kitchen, feeding students in the normal way that students coming into universities at the beginning of the year end up, there's a hiatus where people don't have money for food and they're not yet registered. And so there's a lot of hunger and insecurity and all sorts of things. So through one of those initiatives, one of the years, when there was quite a lot of strong student life, pre-COVID student life going on, we set up a crisis center basically, that went on to having a collective kitchen and was starting to have a food garden when we were all closed down and chased off campus by COVID and authorities. And we were also having the same kind of conversations about how to involve workers, using the alliances that had built up through Fees Must Fall and insourcing of workers, all of those relationships to help build a way to work between students and workers and staff that ground workers and staff that could make food sovereignty more ongoing, and sustainable in the vagaries, in the changes of university campuses where students do pass through and things like that. And it's just interesting. Then during COVID, of course, we couldn't be doing anything on campus, but through my courses, I did make food one of the issues for basically anything to do with food and feeding, and an issue for an action research project that first years had to do, with some interesting results. People really going in and learning more about growing food in their communities generally was how it played out. So I'm just really picking up on this side, on this aspect of it, and I'm really interested to hear from people in residential communities as much as university communities, our thoughts about how to re-mobilize, because COVID brought its own mobilization of food kitchens and gardens. And before that, we'd had Fees Must Fall and other campus-based struggles that certainly in our case fed into mobilizing student participation in growing food as a political issue, because that seemed to be a driver. Of course, there's hunger still, but it's kind of gone back into the shadows and individualized. And when the institution is involved, which our institution does do, it's doing things about gardens, but they quite top heavy, and they're about competition to show who can grow something best, and it's short and sporadic and goes away and it's not integrated with building organization, political consciousness, I think. So I just think that that's a critical part of it. Some of the speakers earlier were mentioning this being part of like World Food Days and things that helped people to realize they're not isolated individuals and communities, and that they're part of a broader struggle in general, and that food sovereignty is linked within that. So yeah, that's just a few thoughts and kind of questions if that can be picked up on a little bit. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jane. You've raised some very important points. You know, the fact that hunger the hunger crisis is being put under the carpet is one of the things that has prompted us to put out a statement, as well as develop the hashtag Hunger South Africa, because the issue of hunger is an emergency that has to be dealt with now. And like I said at the beginning, what's so important about these food sovereignty hubs and pathways is that they are also spaces of political consciousness, linking food with the broader struggles against neoliberalism, against monopoly control, and against commercialization, and so on and so forth. But you raise an important question of mobilization. And perhaps Jane, Davin, Natalie, and Geronimo, you can just for 1 minute talk about how you have been mobilizing in the different spaces. Jane, you can go first, and then Davin, and then Geronimo, and then we wrap up.
Sure. No, I think that's a great question, Jane. Yeah, our mobilizing specifically at WITS is usually happens around events. So we'll host a workshop and we'll invite the public, and we'll get quite a good turn up, about 40 or 50 people sometimes. And then we have the training, and that usually really inspires people. And then we have sign-up forms, and we say, okay, please join the WITS Food Sovereignty Alliance. We've got a WhatsApp group, or join the Garden Volunteers group. And then we keep them in the loop with any future events that we have. But we also, it's not just food, so we're also running a climate justice education series, and we've invited students to join us there. This is also with the WCCO. It really helps to have an institution that we can work with. So the WCCO is embedded in WITS, and there's a lot of student volunteers who go there because they want to help. So they'll help with the food bank, or they'll see the gardens and they'll go there and say, we want to get involved in the gardens. And so sometimes we don't have to do any work for students, just come to us. But sometimes we do try and host a lot of events, information sessions, and bring the students in. And yeah, we're still trying to develop this Food Sovereignty Alliance. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jane. Comrade Davin, your 1 minute. Comrade Davin.
Thank you, Charles. How we gonna mobilize is to bring the women and the youth to maybe the community center, where we're gonna speak about climate justice, about the climate justice movement, and also what women need. And also on the 16th of October, it will be the Rural Women's Day. So we will speak about hunger in South Africa, and also how we're gonna build the food sovereignty pathway. We also need to reach out to the coastline, the Warumbai, and also people staying along the Oliver estuary, where we also will include other women and other movements that work in the West Coast down to Namakwaland. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Comrade. Comrade Geronimo, your 1 minute.
Hi, comrade. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I was just on the road, but I heard that I need to speak on how I mobilize, but I'm not sure how we will mobilize or how we mobilize before. Can you just in 2 seconds clarify that for me, please?
How you are currently mobilizing people? Yeah.
Okay, now thank you very much for that question. It's an absolutely great question. I think how we are currently mobilizing is, of course, through the projects and through the programs that we have on a daily basis within our food garden, after school projects, and also within our feeding schemes. So what we are doing is we're doing it different. Before we do a feeding within the community, we always make sure that we give some kind of program where we bring people together. So on the open space in the school, or we rent the school hall, where we bring, you know, the youth together in the community together, different communities where communities come together and, you know, collaborate more on the daily issues that they are facing and see the ways how we can, as different communities, diverse communities from different areas, can, you know, resolve such issues as well. And then, of course, secondly, we mobilize through ways where we go into communities. I think one of the first mobilization that we have done was, you know, go from door to door as well, where community members can't come out, but we go to them. And thirdly, we also mobilize within our high schools, and in our high schools, they would pass on the messages, and so through that ways we do our mobilization and go into communities where our volunteers is, and create a community, maybe a community meeting, a big community meeting where we address the communities and where we tell them what is next, of course, for Feed the Future. So there's different mobilizing tools that we have in place and that we are working in. Sometimes we mobilize through Zoom, sometimes we mobilize in person with our program that we have. So we have weekly programs within our food garden, and that is the ways how we mobilize. We invite people, people from different communities, representatives from different communities, and then we mobilize through networking and through solidarity, of course, by the project that that's currently running in our spaces. So that is how we mobilize in our spaces, outside our spaces, door to door, and within schools.
Thank you so much, Comrade. Sister I and Comrade Netley, your 1 minute. Comrades, are you there?
Sorry, comrade, I didn't get what you're saying.
Your final words, comrades.
Oh yeah, just give me 1 minute. The final word that we would like to say is that regarding Jane's input, we are actually hoping that in future we will have like exchanges so that people in our areas who are not yet on that level as the garden at the university will be able to get that kind of exposure, because also in our areas we are sitting with many people who is unemployed due to school dropouts and so forth. So if they could see that kind of exposure and that kind of experience, if they can get those kinds of experience, I think that will be very much useful. And what is the gentleman that spoke right straight after me? I don't remember his name. I'm looking forward to see some of the videos that they have uploaded, and maybe just for interest sake, I would like to ask you guys to go and look out. There's a page you can also view. It's called Ilizwe Lenyanyiso Lomhlaba. It is the youth group that we work with to capture stories of communities. Ilizwe Lenyanyiso Lomhlaba means the true voice of the land. So there is also quite a few of our work within the other programs that is in there. So thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to learn again, once again, from each other. And I really do hope that we will be able to have exchanges to not just speak to each other in these kinds of ways, but to be able to enable our communities to see and experience it in your own spaces. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, comrade. Comrades, just in closing, we are running this campaign, Hunger South Africa, and we call on all faith communities to stand with us on October 16 on World Food Day to end hunger in our communities through food sovereignty pathways. Now we are making the following calls. 1, the activation of the Disaster Management Act to ensure immediate food relief for vulnerable children, households, and communities. Our second demand is the adoption of the People's Food Sovereignty Act to ensure zero hunger in communities and local control of food systems. And we are continuing our call for your universal basic income grant. So thank you so much, comrades, for being with us this afternoon. Please take the call to your communities, take the call to your constituencies. Apologies for going a little bit over the time, but thank you so much for your time and for your patience. Have a wonderful day. Thank you very much. Bye.